Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Science of Influence: How to Inspire Yourself and Others to Greatness by Brian Tracy with Dan Strutzel. Narrated by Brian Tracy and Dan Strutzel.
One of the most popular skills to develop in the field of human relations is the skill of influence. This is because without developing and refining this skill, all other aspects of human relations are ineffective at best and a failure at worst. If you attempt to communicate your business idea to an investor but lack the skill of influence, your idea will fall flat and fail to generate the venture capital decision that you need. If you want your children to adopt the moral values that you hold dear but lack the skill of influence, your perspective will pale in comparison to the social media and their peer group. If you want to convince your spouse that she needs to take her health seriously, but lack the skill of influence, she may ultimately get the bad news at her doctor's office when it is too late. Or perhaps you are trying to break an addiction to caffeine or endless web surfing, but you lack the skill of influence. You will be unable to convince yourself that delaying your gratification and establishing an empowering new habit is even worth it. Influence is like the combination on a strong titanium lock. Imagine that the ability to communicate is the spinning of that lock, and the lock itself secures the consciousness of the mind of another human being, or yourself. If all you do is communicate through endless talking, inattentive listening, online forms of communication, or strong mandates, it's like spinning the numbers on the lock over and over. But if you develop the key skills of influence, it's like knowing the exact combination on that lock and gaining access to the full consciousness of another person or yourself. That's what you'll learn in this program: the skills of influence, the specific numbers to that highly guarded lock combination that allows you to produce incredible results. Results like happier personal relationships, more sales, more profitable partnerships, and an increased ability to hold yourself to commitments that are important to you. How would you like to be the number one influence in your child's life? How would you like to convince your local community to vote for you as a school board member? How would you like to lead your office in sales results month after month? All of these results can be yours in this cutting-edge program with Brian Tracy, The Science of Influence: How to Inspire Yourself and Others to Greatness. In this dynamic discussion between myself, Dan Strutzel, and Brian, you'll learn the very best ideas, strategies, and techniques about influence that Brian has developed in over 40 years in the self-development industry. But even more, you'll hear some of Brian's latest thinking on the topic, presented right here for the very first time. This is the third audiobook in the Dynamic Conversations series with Brian and myself, where we discuss some of the most critical topics for succeeding in the world today. And like our previous two audiobooks, The Science of Money and The Science of Motivation, here you'll discover that there truly is a science to influence, a science that has been tested and proven again and again, not just for years or for decades, but for millennia. Ideas on how to be more influential with others started back in biblical times, continued through the Renaissance period, progressed through the 20th century with landmark publications like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and have continued to the present day with new discoveries in neuroscience, neuro-linguistic programming, and more. And while new theories of influence can arise all the time, just as we have new theories for cures for cancer or baldness, for example, the discipline of science and its rules for testing and verifying results will, in short order, move these ideas from the realm of theory to fact. The goal of this program is to bring you many of the verified facts about influence, eliminate the myths and half-formed theories, and leave you with a treasure trove of ideas for becoming more influential in your own life and in the lives of those you care about. So welcome to The Science of Influence: How to Inspire Yourself and Others to Greatness with self-development expert Brian Tracy. Brian, it's great to be with you here again.
It's wonderful to be with you as well, and to be able to share these ideas I've invested about 150,000 hours over the last 50 years studying these subjects and others and weaving them together into a complex network of ideas with one idea influencing another, influencing another, influencing another. And sometimes a single insight, people have come up to me in my seminars and pointed this out and said that single insight combined with what they already knew, but they had never seen it from that point of view, totally transformed the way they saw themselves, the other person, their life, their relationship, their family, their business partnership, their customer, their money. That it was just kind of like a fireworks display going off within their brain.
Excellent. Well, excellent. And this, we're going to share, and hopefully many people listening are going to have that same experience with this program, having that the fireworks go off in their brain, and also in other people's brains, people like their children, their employees, other people that they're really trying to lead. So let's start, Brian, with session 1, and we're calling that "What's So Special About Influence?" And as I said in the opening to this program, the topic of influence is typically one of the most popular best-selling topics in the area of self-development. So that begs the question, what's so special about influence? Why is this specific skill or ability so popular? Is influence simply about controlling others to get what you want, or is it about something more positive and important? And what unique insights do you have on the topic that runs contrary to the popular wisdom from most self-development authors? So we're going to address those topics and more in this session. So, Brian, you have been one of the most influential authors and speakers in the personal development arena over the past 40 years, as I said. So I'd like to begin by asking you, what is your definition of influence?
Well, one of the very best definitions that's come out recently is moving. And, I speak different languages, and in different languages they have different words for it. But moving means taking a person from one state of thinking or set of conclusions to another state of thinking. Almost like, say, it's like going a jump up 2 or 3 flights of stairs. If you can imagine that human beings have one primary motivation going back 6,000 years, and the primary motivation is for improvement. We say all attempts to sell, all attempts to buy are an attempt to improve one's condition in some way. We call this the ABC theory of motivation. A stands for antecedents, which is where you are before you meet an influence. B are the behaviors that you take or you're suggested to take. And then C are the consequences. And the formula is that 15% of your actions are determined by antecedents, previous events, and 85% of your motivation to move, to change, come from the anticipated consequences. So here's what we know, is that a person will only move, change, take an action of any kind, be influenced, if they feel that they are going to be better off afterwards. And the more convinced they are that they will be substantially better off afterwards, then the more open they are to influence of any kind. In some work that I did, I used an example. I say, imagine a business plaza with people walking to and from their jobs and offices and meetings and so on, all normal, rational business people, properly dressed and so on. And you walk out into the middle of the business plaza, and you have in your hand, concealed, you have $101 bills. And at a certain moment in this plaza, you just suddenly throw the $100 bills into the air, throw them up. And so they fill the air and begin to flutter down. Now, for a couple of seconds, people look and they see the money moving. They see this is free money and it's floating in the air. And within seconds, people go from normal and rational and thinking about their life and their work to berserk, shouting, grabbing, screaming, clutching, pushing other people away, jumping on them, physically violent, going after this free money. because there's only a certain amount of it. Other people are pursuing it. It'll soon be gone. If you don't move quickly, you won't get your share. And the whole public goes berserk until all the money is gone. You've also heard of stories where an armored car was driving down the street and a door came open on the back end, or it had an accident, and money poured out onto the highway or the street, and the traffic stopped, and people started running and coming from all directions and shouting and fighting and piling over everybody. Well, you could just say that all this money floating in the air was a form of influence. It's causing a behavior that would never have been there, and it's causing it to take place almost instantaneously. So when you have a really good advertisement, for some example, like the most famous one today is an Apple iPhone release, where they announced all of these special features, and the phone will be available at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. And people, knowing very little about anything, are sleeping on the streets, sometimes 100 or 200 or 300. They even have what are called placeholders, people who will walk up and down, and for $5 they'll hold your place while you go to the bathroom or get some food or change some clothes, and they'll just work the line, taking people's places so that people don't lose their place in line, because they are so eager to get the product. They're so influenced by it. So that's a gross distinction. And influence is basically that. It's causing people to be so excited about the improvement that will take place in their lives, and the speed with which that improvement will take place, that people will line up and engage in behaviors that, from an outside point of view, seem to be almost insane. But because of the intense desire for the improvement that will take place, people will engage in behaviors that are completely unbelievable to the outside person.
That's fascinating. Well, in your life, and I've known you for many years, Brian, and you have been one of the most successful authors and speakers in the self-development arena. But even more than that, what's amazing is there are some people who speak about a topic, and it's kind of like a mental lollipop. You know, when the lollipop's over, people need another dose, another dose. It's kind of like they get a high just from the speaking. But then there are some authors that I've worked with who actually are very good at getting people to produce results in their lives. And you've been one of those who's just, we've gotten testimonials over the years when I was with Nightingale Conant and on that, boy, I took the ideas from Brian's program, the psychology of achievement or the psychology of success, and I produced amazing results. I mean, the results are noticeable in all that you have done. And what would you say has been helpful for you to be successful in not only being a great speaker, but getting people to actually take action that produce results in their lives and having that kind of influence?
Well, my secret to success, if there is a secret, and I don't believe in secrets, is that I have done enormous amounts of research, as I said, thousands of hours, to try to find out why it is that some people are more successful than others. And everyone has a desire to achieve the very most, the fastest and easiest way possible, with the very least concern for secondary consequences. So when I was 21, I read a book about Abraham Maslow, and it was an explanation of his work. And basically it said that every person has a desire to fulfill their potential. A great metaphysical teacher once wrote that all frustration and anger, all depression and all social problems comes from a deep down feeling that one has far more potential than they are currently using, and they don't know how to get it out. It's almost as if they had a gold mine under their soil. They had an oil well under their farm, but they have no idea of how to release this potential, and so they are frustrated and angry as a result. And so when I've come along, I said, look, Each person has this amount of potential. So what is the starting point of getting it out? Well, the first step is to realize that it is there, that you have more potential than you could use in 100 lifetimes, is that there are millions and now tens of millions of people all over the world who've gone from rags to riches, become millionaires and billionaires in a single generation. And what they have done, you can do as well. And so what I will do is I will show you what other people, starting with nothing, frustrated for long periods of time, finally did, which transformed their lives. It turned the switch. It opened the door. It's almost like a combination lock. I used to say that success is like a combination lock, only with more numbers. Just like in selling, there's a 7-step combination to selling. This has been validated and verified by interviews with tens of thousands of customers, tens of thousands of videotaped sales conversations, and they've developed a process that if an average person follows it, they make sale after sale after sale. And this is not just me, it's IBM and Xerox, and some of the biggest companies in the world have studied the sales process by video and through interview and found that there is a process. It does follow 7 steps. If you follow the 7 steps systematically and orderly, eventually you get the same result that other people get. And I've taught this to more than 2 million people worldwide. My friend Og Mandino once said to me, he said, "Brian, there are no secrets of success." He said there are simple rules and principles that have been discovered and rediscovered throughout all of human history. And all you have to do is learn them, practice them over and over, and you get the same results as the most successful companies in any industry or any business. And surprise, surprise, it works. So wonderfully enough, in terms of influencing people, to influence people, you need to do a certain series of logical things. And if you do them in the right way, then people will be open to your influence. They will want to be influenced by you. They will seek your guidance and your direction. They'll perform at higher levels than you ever thought possible. And you'll get results beyond anything that you ever received before.
You know, Brian, I wanted to ask you, the words influence and persuasion are kind of thrown around a lot as being kind of the same thing. Do you see those as being, those concepts as being identical, or do you see influence having slightly different elements than just persuading somebody?
Yes, I think influence and persuasion are similar but different. You can have influence on people just by being a particular kind of person. For example, we talk about the importance of a role model. A role model, if a person believes that you are a particular type of person, a person of character, a person of clarity, a person of conviction, then they will be much more influenced by you than if they believe nothing at all or they believe something wrong. One of the things we talk about in terms of parenting is we know that 40 to 50% of a child's habits are developed by their parents, and that your habits largely determine your success or failure in life. We know that children are greatly persuaded and influenced by just the way their parents behave with each other and toward them. So someone once said, the kindest thing that a man can do for his children is to love their mother. It's a very simple thing. And my wife and I knew that when we first got married. We read all the books. We began teaching on the subject. And so my children have always seen me respecting my wife, Barbara, at a very high level. So 2 of them are now married, and one has unfortunately gotten unmarried. So 3 of them got married, but they all married women that they respected and who respected them, and they all treated these women with great respect. So the 2 that are still happily married, one has 2 children, one has 3. They get along famously with each other. They're the very best of friends. And when we spend time together, It's like groups of best friends with their in-laws. We call them in-laws. My son is married to a lovely woman. My daughter's married to a great guy. And they treat their children with great respect. And we treat their children with great respect. They don't persuade, but they influence by example. And they all expect to be treated well by other members of the opposite sex, and they all treat other people well. So you see there, the influence of the example that you said is quite extraordinary. Tom Peters, in his book, In Search of Excellence, said the most important thing that he found in the book was the power of influence that a parent has, that a parent can really change the psychological dynamic of a child by just being an example. Because children will ignore what you say. You can tell them, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. But they watch everything that you do, and they absorb it through the skin. And so they'll always behave toward people in their world the way you behave toward people in your world, especially toward their spouse, the way you treat them. If you treat your children with respect, then they will treat others with respect, and they will expect to be treated with respect. If you treat them with respect, they will see themselves as being worthy of respect, as it says in the movie, but also they will treat other people as though they are worthy of respect. It's the most amazing darn thing. So you as a role model have tremendous influence. Now, persuasion is where you can persuade a person into engaging in a behavior that they would not have engaged in the absence of your persuasion. So this brings us into the area of sales, and sales is something very different. And it brings you to the factor, which we'll probably talk about later, is that people do things for their reasons, not for your reasons. So your great goal, at least at the beginning of a conversation, but throughout, is to find out what it is that people want and show them that what you're encouraging them to do or not to do is the fastest way to get the things they want.
That's a great distinction. I've always wondered about that too, so I appreciate that. We often associate influential people with being very charismatic. Do you think there is a strong association between influences and charisma? And in what way are the two concepts positively or negatively associated with one another?
Well, it's a great question. I'm one of the few people who have written a book called The Power of Charisma, which has been published worldwide. It's been a bestseller worldwide, sold many tens or hundreds of thousands of copies. I can't even keep track of it. And my co-author and I, Ron Arden, who directed 150 plays on the London stage. And in directing a play, what you do is you take the script, which may be a Shakespearean script that's 300 years old, and you pick the actors for each of the roles, and then you direct the play anew so that the play is a new version. You worst thing that you could have a critic say is, this play is no different from the last version of Shakespeare's King Lear. So you have to take each actor and get them to take a slightly different role or approach, and then you have to get them to act a slightly different way to make it a more interesting and more different version of a play that many people may have heard from different directors many times. So Ron and I wrote this book, Charisma, and in Charisma we talk about how you become a warm and emoting person so that people like you and are influenced by you and consider you to be a charming person. Because if a person considers you to be charming, they're much more open to and influenced by you as an individual. A charismatic person is someone whom you warm up to. You kind of are influenced by them. You kind of like them. You kind of lean toward them. And so if you go right back to Dale Carnegie's wonderful admonition in How to Win Friends and Influence People, he said the key to charisma, or winning friends and influence people is to make people feel important. Make people feel important. So our whole book, it has 35 chapters on charisma, are all the little things that you can do in the course of your conversation with them to make them feel important. And sometimes it has very little to do with words at all. You don't even say anything. You don't try to impress them. You use what we call the law of indirect effort. If you want to impress a person, the fastest way is to be impressed by them. If you want a person to like you, the very fastest way is for you to like them. And so the more you can be impressed by a person, like them, find them to be valuable and important, then the more they start to think of you as really an interesting and charismatic person. Now, it goes back to the basic rule, is who is everyone's favorite person, and it's themselves. And who do people think about most of the time? And the answer is people think about themselves 99% of the time. A person who's sitting there with a toothache can be surrounded by a whole bunch of people, but they're thinking more about that toothache than they are by everybody around them and by the news of the day and by what's on television and in the newspaper. Their sore tooth totally preoccupies 99% of their mental activity. So how do you prove to be charismatic? Well, it's very simple. You become interested in other people. How do you become interested in other people is you ask them questions about themselves, and then you listen closely and attentively to the answers. Like whatever the person has said about themselves is fascinating. You want people to be fascinated by you? Be fascinated by them. So you ask them, what sort of work do you do? And there's a whole series of questions, and they should be illegal because they're so effective. But you say, hello, my name's Brian Tracy. What's yours? My name's Dan Strutzel. Really? Dan Strutzel. Repeat the name, Dan Strutzel. What sort of work do you do, Dan? You say, well, I work in this area. I work in recording, writing, editing, producing programs for national and international audiences. Geez, holy smokes, and what does that involve? What sort of work are you doing now in that area? And then another great question is, how did you get into that area of work anyway? And then listen. And whatever the person says, just listen and listen and listen until they stop talking. And then you say, and then what did you do? And then what did you do? So you could use 3 questions, and 3 questions are almost like getting 3 rings spinning. And you keep asking these questions, and people love to talk about their career history. So they will add another spin to the wheel. They say, well, I started in this way and so on. Well, now I'm working on this, and that didn't work out, so we're probably looking at doing something like that. Well, and then what did you do? Well, then what we did is we called these people, and then every so often people will pause because they're not sure if you're interested or if you're just being polite or if you're just having them on. So you immediately say, well, and then what did you do? And what did you do then? And what did you do after that? And what would you advise someone who would be thinking of going into an industry like yours? Or what have been the greatest influences on you in getting into this industry? And what do you think was the most successful thing you did that may have had the greatest influence on your career? Just keep asking people over and over about their career and how they started and what they did and what they did then and so on. And after 60 minutes, you can say, well, thank you very much. I don't mean to keep you from other people that you want to talk to, but you sound like you got a fascinating life, and I hope I get a chance to talk to you again later. Yes, by all means. And then the person will go away and say, that's the most charming man I ever spoke to. That man is fascinating. I mean, he is such an interesting person to talk to. And you probably asked 5 questions in 1 hour. And it's absolutely astonishing how influential you can be on a person. If later you said, I'd like to introduce you to a friend, well, that person will be very interested. Or you called them later.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?